Back. We'll continue now with our conversation regarding the characters from the Canterbury Tales. I'm with you on page 107. Following the guild fraternity, we now will meet the cook. Now, we don't have a lot about this cook, but we're going to see Chaucer's genius in his creation of character tags, as we sometimes will refer to it. That is to say, let's write this down, to be a character tag. Something we say or read about the character, which we will remember long after the fact. I can predict in advance that we're going to say something about this cook that you are not going to forget for a very long time. Let's see if I'm right or wrong about this, all right? I'm with you on page 107. Let's read it. They had a cook with us. This is line for your notes. Line 389. This is one of the shortest introductions of any of the characters of the general prologue. And yet, many of my students have said, ironically, it's the one they remember for the longest. We'll get to maybe why in a second. They had a cook with them who stood alone for boiling chicken with a marrow bone, sharp flavoring powder, and a spice for savor. Now, let's just point out for your notes really quickly, the idea of the cook makes some sense because the journey from London to Canterbury is going to be longer than a day. And so they're going to maybe need someone along the way when they stop to cook them some food. That's kind of the theory of this, all right? And we're told about this chicken that he's about this cook that he's really good cook. Let's keep going. He could distinguish London ale by flavor, and he could roast and seethe and broil and fry, could make good thick soup and bake a tasty pie. So in other words, let's write it in our notes. Chaucer says about him, he's a great cook, and he also has a fine palate for wine or ale. He can tell you where in London the drink that he's drinking has come from. But now we're going to meet a pretty interesting tag. Let's take a look. Line 395. But what a pity, so it seemed to me, that he should have an ulcer on his knee. As for black mange, he made it with the best. Now, let's just point out something here. This is sometimes difficult in translation for us to immediately understand. He says two things about this cook. Let's write it down. One, he's a really good cook. Two, he has a big, nasty, pussy boil on his knee. And he reaches down and he touches it. And then he makes food. Which makes them obviously wonder, while they're eating his fine food, right? This is an interesting tag. Just a little comment that Chaucer can throw in. He was great at preparing food. The only problem was he kept touching this nasty pussy sore on his leg, and it made you wonder all the time while you were eating his food what had been on his hands while he had made the food. Now let's just pause for a moment at 3b and make a quick observation, and that's why I say oftentimes you don't forget this. The next time you go out to eat, and you sit down to eat in a restaurant, some of you will say, no, don't say this. You do realize you sit down and you tell somebody what you want, and that somebody walks out of the room where you're sitting into another room. And somebody in another room who you can't see is the one who makes you your food. Chaucer here is going to make you wonder, I wonder what's going on back in there. I wonder what's on his or her hands. I wonder what kind of things are going on in the kitchen. And for many of us who have never spent any time in a kitchen of a restaurant, we got no idea. Let's just point out something for our notes here at level 2A. We always are trusting people, even though we don't realize it's trust. When you go out to eat and you order cuisine and it is brought to you, you are trusting the person who is making that food for you that he or she is doing it appropriately. It's clean. Notice here, we had a great cook with us, but he had this nasty running pussy thing on his knee, which he kept touching, kind of grody. And like I said, this is something that I've had students write back to me and say long after the fact, I still go out to eat and I still remember Chaucer's cook every once in a while with that disgusting knee problem that he had. Of course, hey, think about this though. This is brilliant for us. Remember that thing we call a trailer that comes before a movie, right? To excite us or want us to see the actual film of another film, right? Think about this as a trailer. If this is all we know about this cook, we obviously want to know, what kind of story will Chaucer make up that this cook will be the one who tells? This is, again, his genius. He kind of makes us want to know. All right, let's keep going. There was a skipper. Now we're getting them from all over the place now, right? So now we go from a cook to a skipper, a guy who is in charge or captain of a boat. Let's take a look at what we have to say about him. I'm on page 107, line 398 or so. There was a skipper hailing from far west. He came from Dartmouth, so I understood. He rode a farmer's horse as best he could. Now, the as best he could is a fine line. Why? Because this guy spends all of his time where? On a boat. Where are boats? On the water. This is not a guy who spends a lot of time on land. So when you put him on a pony, he doesn't know how to ride so well. He's uncomfortable because he's more accustomed to being on the ocean. Where, of course, people who live on the land, when they go onto the boat, they could be one of these numbers and they're like, oh, I'm getting kind of sick. Our skipper is at home on the sea, but not so at home on the land. Notice Chaucer can infer all of that with that he rode a farmer's horse as best he could, which is he didn't ride it very well, but we'll forgive him because he spends all of his time on the ocean, right? Look at the next one. In a woolen gown that reached his knee, a dagger on a lanyard falling free hung from his neck, under his arm and down. The summer heat had tanned his color brown, and certainly he was an excellent fellow. Many a draught of vintage red and yellow he drawn at Bordeaux, while the trader snored. In other words, he's really good at getting a little bit of drink when he's in ports. The nicer rules of conscience he ignored. In other words, we're told that this is a skipper who doesn't always play by the rules. Let's write that one down. We're going to see a number of these characters of Chaucer who don't actually always play by the rules. And we're told, the nicer rules of conscience he ignored is a way to say, well, he kind of cut corners every once in a while if he could get away with it, right? If, when he fought, the enemy vessel, I'm at line 410, the enemy vessel sank, he sent his prisoners home, they walked the plank. Whoa, let's write this one down. So he captures enemies, and they say, please, 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 just let me go home. And he says, done deal. I'm going to let you go home. And then he walks him to the end of the boat where there's a piece of wood sticking off the end of the boat called the plank, and he says, all right, walk home. Whoa! So note Chaucer's irony here. Also, he's able to tell us something about this skipper. We might say about him that he's kind of gruff, he's kind of rough around the edges, right? Already we're wondering what kind of story a skipper is going to tell for us then, right? As for his skill in reckoning his tides, currents, and many other risks besides, moons, harbors, pilots, he had such dispatch that none from Hull to Carthage was his match. Let's just pause for a moment and point out that in Chaucer's day, okay, I mean, think about this. Columbus sails the ocean blue in 1492. Chaucer dies in 1400. So we're talking right now about people who, when they go out on the ocean, they don't have motors to propel those boats. Yes, they have to rely on sails that catch the wind, right? And their navigation is going to be a lot about looking up at the stars to try to figure out where they are to navigate. We're told here our skipper is pretty good at that kind of stuff. He knows how to get around the ocean, right? Notice, hardy he was. Now let's write that one down. What that means is he's strong. He doesn't get sick. He's got the ability to stay out on the ocean for long periods of time. We're already told he's really suntanned because he spends so much time in the ocean. Hardy he was, prudent in undertaking. His beard in many a tempest had its shaking, and he knew all the heavens as they were, from Gotland to the Cape of Finisterre. And every top of page 108, and every creek in Brittany and Spain, the barge he owned was called the Magellan. Now, it's interesting that we don't have his name, but we have the name of his ship. That is to say, he was very proud of his boat. Now, if you've spent any time around somebody who owns a boat or a yacht or whatever, they're very proud of this. They like to talk about it, and normally they do have a name for it. Usually they paint it on the side. Chaucer is just telling us this skipper was pretty rough around the edges. He kind of mean, but he was a guy that had a tremendous amount of pride in the work that he did. All right, let's keep going. a doctor. Now, before we even start in on this doctor at line 108, think about this for a moment. If you tell your friends as a senior, I'm going to major in medicine. I'm going to medical school. Okay? That's what I want to be a doctor. Think about how most people respond to that. They will say to you, oh, that is so great. You get to get an education that allows you to try to help, for example, little children in a third world country where you can try and help cure them of illness. No. What do most people say when you say you're going to be a doctor? Right? Oh man, you're going to have a Mercedes and have your own parking spot at the country club. That idea that doctors are people who know how to make money off of other people's illnesses is an idea that goes way back in time. We're going to hear now from Chaucer about our doctor, and our doctor is going to be a very interesting fellow. Let's go ahead and write it down already in our notes. When we're talking 1400, we are talking about a different understanding of medicine. If you have something wrong, an ailment of some kind, let's say, for example, your ear is bothering you, and you have to go to the doctor. When you go into the doctor, you already understand this doctor has had special training, this doctor has all kinds of knowledge, and this doctor is going to do all kinds of things that will actually help me to feel better. That's the understanding of what we today understand as going to the doctor. In 1400, when you start getting sick and have to have a doctor, first of all, the doctor's going to come to you. You don't go to the doctor. There's no such thing as a hospital. And when the doctor comes to you, there's probably going to be some pain inflicted on you of all different kinds. Let's read and find out. A doctor, too. It's an interesting verb. A doctor too emerged as we proceeded. Now, this is interesting. It's almost like Chaucer seems to suggest that all of a sudden everybody kind of turned around and they're like, oh, there's a doctor. He just kind of came out of nowhere. It's almost like he's been here, but we didn't see him. Now, that magical, mystical thing is kind of what he's playing into here. In other words, let's just put it in our notes. This doctor can be kind of sneaky. So already, this little phrase about, oh, he kind of emerged, is a way for Chaucer to say, I don't know if you can trust these doctors. I don't know if you can totally trust them. Let's find out why. No one alive could talk as well as he did on points of medicine and of surgery, for being grounded in astronomy, he watched his patient's favorable star, and by his natural magic, and there's the idea about the emergence thing, knew what are the lucky hours and planetary degrees for making charms and magic effigies. Let's just point out that if you got a problem with your ear, the doctor doesn't come to you in the day, he comes to you at night. And he walks outside your house and he looks up at the stars. And he goes, I think I know what's wrong with you. What? You're like, what do you mean? Oh no, look, the stars are telling me what's wrong with your ear. And you're like, are you going to look in my ear? No, I don't need to look in your ear. I have special magical abilities from the stars. In other words, Chaucer is here making fun of the medical profession of his day, which is going to often prey on the poverty of intellect and, to some degree, income. But also, this is a time of the Black Plague when lots and lots of people die. Doctors, the suggestion here will be, like plagues, because they can make lots of money. And of course, they can show up and say, I can cure you, but it's going to cost you something. Or I can cure your child, but it's going to cost you something. And the doctor knows full well that child is not waking up in the morning. He still can get his money. Notice, the cause of every malady just means illness. The cause of every malady you'd got, he knew. And whether dry, cold, moist, or hot, he knew their seat, their humor, and condition. He was a perfect practicing physician. These causes being known for what they were, he gave the man his medicine then and there. All his apothecaries, which just means drugs, in a tribe were ready with the drugs he could prescribe, and each made money from the others. There's the word. Do you see it? I hope you write it down. It's line 438. And each made money from the others' guile. Now, an apothecary is just the old-fashioned drugstore. For those of you who are freshmen and you did Romeo and Juliet, when Romeo decides that he's going to kill himself, where does he go to get his poison? To an apothecary. That is to say, a druggist, okay? In other words, the drugstore, this will sound very modern. The drugstore and the doctor are in collusion with each other. Guile. In other words, the doctor goes, your ear, it's going to need some medicine. I think we got some medicine, but you're going to have to go buy it. Where he goes and buys it at the drugstore, the apothecary. When he shows up, the druggist says, I can do that, but that, man, I don't know, that's a hard drug for me. That one's going to cost you $100. And you go, well, I don't have but $100. Sorry, that's what it's going to cost. So you pay the druggist $100. The druggist turns around and pays the doctor $50. Ooh, do you see this? In other words, the drug store and the doctor are in cahoots together to make what? We're at it. Doctors are all about making money. Now, of course, this is grossly unfair characterization of doctors. Not all doctors are out to make lots of money. And yet, that's a very famous notion, right? What in our culture do we think of as two professions where they're out to make money most of all? Lawyers and doctors. We've already seen his attack on lawyers, and now here's his attack on the medical profession, right? The word guile seems to suggest that this doctor knows exactly what he's doing. He is kind of a scam artist. Now let's put this in our notes. Chaucer has real problems with scam artists, with hypocrites. He will have real problems with the hypocrites of the Catholic Church, especially as he will talk about it, that partner, as we will get to it. Of course, we've already seen our friar, haven't we, right? But also, he has problems with scam artists who are involved in trying to make money out in the secular world, in the non-religious world. That is to say, doctors and lawyers. Let's keep going. They had been friendly for a goodish while, and he was well versed in Escapularius too, and what Hippocrates and Rufus knew. In other words, he knows all these doctors, these ancient doctors' names, now dead and gone. And then he lists a number of them, and this is Chaucer showing off a little bit his own knowledge. That is to say, this doctor liked to talk about all of the famous doctors from times past, the Greek and Roman doctors. In other words, let's just put it in our notes. This doctor is educated, or at least appears to be educated, right? So we'll have all this list. It goes on for quite some time. Let's quickly get now to 445. In his own diet, he observed some measure. There were no superfluities for pleasure, only digestives, nutrients, and such. Now, in other words, he takes care of himself. In other words, he likes to stay alive, right? He wants to be healthy. He wants to look healthy so that other people will think, wow, well, he looks healthy. He must know what he's talking about. Therefore, I'm going to pay him some money, and that way he can make me healthy as well. Notice the next line. We are at line 448. He did not read the Bible very much. Now let's write this down. This is a significant moment for us. In other words, Chaucer is going to suggest that you have two kinds of people. You have those who are religious, read the Bible a lot, and then you have people like our doctor who are far more interested in, let's say it now, this is the famous declension between faith and science. In other words, he's far more into science than he is into religion or theology. In other words, he has kind of, there may be something a little bit dangerous about him even. He knows, for example, Hippocrates, but he doesn't know the Bible very much. He doesn't care very much about the Bible. In other words, he cares more about science than he cares about religion. Of course, this declension between science and religion is going to be one that will follow Chaucer's day and on, won't it, right? He did not read the Bible very much. In blood-red garments, slashed with bluish gray, and lined with taffeta, he rode his way. Yet he was rather close as to expenses, and kept the gold he won in pestilences. Whoa! Did you see what you read? Gold won in pestilences. In other words, when there is the plague, he likes it because he can make money at trying to heal people when he knows they're going to die. Okay? Good guy, bad guy, you get to kind of decide. Notice what he says about gold. Gold stimulates the heart, or so we're told. He therefore had a special love of gold. Gold stimulates the heart. He's a doctor. He wants you to have a healthy heart, and therefore, if you'll give me your gold, I can make you healthy. In other words, let's just say it out loud. Chaucer is outright going to say that the major thing that motivates a doctor to be a doctor is he wants money. He likes wealth. Now, of course, let's just say this. Today, huge debate, isn't there? Why do drugs cost so much? The drug companies will know certain drugs need to be used by people who are dying maybe of certain health problems, and so they can jack the prices of those drugs up really, really high. Question, is that the right thing or the wrong thing to do? And of course, people know how to make money still today off of illness. This, of course, leads to the whole political debate about should everyone be able to have health insurance, or rather, should health insurance be something that you appropriate to yourself because you get a living and you make enough money to pay for it? This is an ongoing debate. Let's go ahead and write it in our notes. Chaucer was way ahead of his time. He was able to see things that were coming long, long into the future, like this debate, for example, about religion and science, like this debate about whether health care and money should have anything to do with it. In other words, should the people who have the most money get the best health care? Well, of course, we'll kind of roll our eyes and say, well, obviously that's the way it is. No. We're not asking the way it is. We're asking the way it should be. Should it be the case that if you make a lot of money, you get a really good doctor, but if you don't make any money, you get a really crummy doctor or maybe no doctor at all? Is that fair? See, this is going to be a debate, and Chaucer is already weighing in on it. Are you ready for this? In 1400. In 1400, Chaucer's weighing in on this debate. Obviously, a lot has happened and transpired since that time. The last of this section that we're going to meet is the wife of Bath. I'm with you on page 108, line 455. Let's take a look now at this wife of Bath, all right? A worthy woman from beside Bath City. Bath City, by the way, is just a city in England. Was with us, somewhat deaf, which was a pity. Now, this is going to be an irony. Let's write this down. We're